Hello and welcome to Kindred Academy, the show that deals with all things Vampire the Masquerade, 5th edition. I'm Peter.
And I'm Carlos, and this week's lesson, the Lasombra.
So Clan Lasombra are a new clan that's been introduced through Chicago by Night from Onyx Path Publishing. And like several of the clans, they have a connection to the church, but unlike some of the other clans, this is not from a spiritual point of view. This is about a control point of view. The Lasombra are very much a clan of dominance and power, also known as keepers and magisters and shadows. And the other aspect to them that's just worth mentioning is that they also are a clan that dabbles in powers and activities that are actively bad for the soul, that kind of cling to everything they do.
So in the lore, the history of the clan Lasombra starts with all the antediluvians, Lasombra himself, who goes by several names and has always had this sort of connection with the darkness and the abyss. He was apparently a very unremarkable man in life, which would probably explain why Lasombra tend to be overachievers. That kind of stays with them in their life. The eldest amongst them, there are many in the lore, Montano, Graciano, they have been around for centuries, some of them millennia. Montano apparently was embraced about 2,000 years BC. So it's a very old clan that throughout the ages has always had a seat of power around the Mediterranean, and it's almost always very common to find the elders drawn to the sea, or every Lasombra to be submerging water. It's a connection, people don't know why it happens. Now, control of the Mediterranean, and especially things in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Italy, is pretty much the whole domain of the Lasombra. And they were a high clan during the Dark Ages, always exerting control, either in their own domains or being the advisor to a prince. And throughout that period, they realized the very real and palpable power the church had. So they went into the places of power within the church, controlling people and becoming the hand behind the church, and would influence the Dark Ages in a different way. The politics and the nobility were left to the Toreador and the Ventru, Shemisk, and other clans. They would be most of the power of the church. They did not step back from that, and throughout the ages they have still remained in places of power within the church, even though the power of the church in society has completely declined. In modern nights, they are still very active, and they have always been walking a very, very thin line. When the Convention of Thorns took place and the Camarilla was formed, and then the counter sect, if you will, the Sabbat was formed, the Lasombra, or a group of the Lasombra led by Graciano, one of Lasombra's child, went and created the Sabbat together with the Shemisk and other anti-tribus. But there are some descendants of the Lasombra lineage that are part of the Camarilla. And the Lasombra always try to dominate people, kindred or kind, and are always at odds with their own clan. So the Camarilla and the Sabbat Lasombra are always fighting one another. Now, this is especially difficult for those in the Camarilla and those that are trying to get into the Camarilla, because they have to fight all the negative views that the clans and the Camarilla have of them, but also they have to survive the attacks of their own brethren.
So in terms of gifts of the blood, one of those that the Lasombra have is Dominate. Now again, many clans have Dominate, but the thing about the Lasombra they're known for is about just how ruthless they are with it. This is very much a clan that's going to favour perhaps the compel and control routes through mesmerize and the like to get what they want, and they are not afraid to use that to break people. Indeed, the Lasombra are often viewed poorly by other clans for being so brutal, though of course that brutality gets a certain amount of respect with it.
Another discipline of the Lasombra, which is basically the staple of them, is Oblivion. And Oblivion is, well, in previous editions known as Obteneration, is the power of the abyss, and in this case, shadows themselves. Now, the Oblivion is shared, Oblivion as a discipline is shared with another clan, the Hecata, but for the Lasombra is a discipline that deals with shadows and the manipulation of them, their use, either to slowly chip away and break the will of people through shadow cast, to the tenebrous form they can get. They are a clan that uses the shadows, and in that use, they look upon the abyss beyond life and death itself, and they sometimes lose a little bit of their soul for it.
Yeah, it's also worth noting it's an interesting, because even within the mechanics of that discipline, there is also a connection between that and the humanity stain mechanic, which is unique, I think.
Yeah, it's the only discipline that has that sort of interaction.
Yes. So their third gift, their third discipline is that of potent. And again, it's interesting that for the Lasombra, this is a tool used for power and control. So the idea of if you have a fearsome display of strength, you can cow your enemies and you can make it they will never rise up against you. That is where their use of potence goes. It's not that they want to use it hands-on to get their hands on their food and to break mortals in that way, but displays and ways to manipulate others is how their preferred use of potence is.
It's the respect that comes with strength.
They also have a special amalgam power.
And it is pretty much unique to them. It's an Oblivion power, level 2 Oblivion power, that is an amalgam with potence, and is Arms of the Iron Man. So previous players of the game, V20 and previous editions, will remember Obteneration having the Arms of the Iron Man, the shadow tentacles. Now it is an Oblivion power, but it's only available to the Lasombra, or if you have Potence and Oblivion, then you would try to get that amalgam power. And it allows you to control shadows, shadow tendrils, to grapple and hold, sometimes asphyxiate your opponents.
So in addition to the gifts of the blood, the Lasombra also carry a clan curse. Those of you familiar with V20 will know that historically the Lasombra often cast no reflection or had a distorted reflection. In V5 this is slightly different. There still is an issue with their reflection, it is distorted. But this has been carried forward to not just mirrors, but anything which captures their image or their voice, whether that is a reflective surface, whether it is a camera, whether it is a microphone for their voice. And as that bane severity grows, so too do their distortions. And this is connected to this thing with the Lasombra dabbling with powers beyond the mortal, and they and their soul are slightly dislocated from ordinary reality, and that dislocation is captured in their reflection.
So also from that veins of the blood, the compulsion that is typical of the Lasombra is ruthlessness. So the Lasombra are known to be guys that and girls that will do things and will see them through. If they have something in their mind and they put something in their sights, they will do it. But the compulsion takes this to a darker level. Whenever they try an action and they fail, gaining a compulsion, they have the need, the desperate need in their blood to see that through. Do it over and over until they succeed. So sometimes being, always pushing forwards and relentless and not giving up is good. But in this case, they will trample on anything and anyone just to get things done.
So interestingly with the Lasombra, they are coming through in Chicago by Night. So we would strongly recommend you check out that book from Onyx Path. There are many good suggestions for characters in there, but we would also like to give you a couple of our own. And the first one is going to be a mortal first concept. So this is the idea of a character that in their mortal life was a sculptor. And the reason that they have been embraced into the Lasombra clan is that they can create molds and sculpt people. Because one of the things about the Lasombra is you start to lose touch with what you look like and who you are. And that's a fundamental part of maintaining our identities. So this will be someone that will be giving people back their own image. Now, of course, how they choose to represent that image and whether the recipient is happy with that image is another question.
And a concept using the bane of the clan as a focus, sort of a kindred first approach, according to our character creation approaches, would be someone who was the victim of a hate embrace, is the best way. It's usually associated with the Nosferatu, that they sometimes embrace on a whim someone who is beautiful, to see them, see their physical features and their beauty fade. In this case, this Kindred in particular was an influencer, someone who was very active in media. And I'm talking about audio-visual media. Someone who is a blogger or a content creator, YouTuber or the like, Instagrammer, that now is embraced and is forced back and out of what they do. They are still very good socially with people, and they can sway the masses. So they are still useful to the clan, but they lost the tools that allowed them to do so.
So those are examples from us, but I'm fairly sure you have some of your own that are even better.
And that's this week's homework. Leave in the comments below all your ideas for Lasombra characters that you have played in the past, or Lasombras that you would like to play, how their clan bane would be affecting their daily lives. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we will see you in the next lesson. Bye.
Bye. Those of you familiar with V5,